With that being said, the greatest proof we have of the legitimacy that there is a God is the Jewish people. There's no great evidence, just their very existence proves that there's a God if you look at their history. I also want you to know that there's a lot of teaching out there about these lost tribes. There are no lost tribes. It is a Gnostic teaching. Hebrew roots, there are no Hebrew roots. It's the Bible. I don't like the term. People say, well, we're from the 10 tribes, so we're Israelites. We're from the 2 southern tribes, so we're Jews because we're from Judah. Well, we're actually Hebrews. We're from Mesopotamia. Listen to me. If you read your Bible and study it like I have, the word Jew, Israel, and Hebrew are used interchangeably. It's one people biologically. And they have a purpose, and God has a plan for them. If you are not biologically Jewish, you are no lesser of a citizen of Israel because grafted in, whether you're a natural branch or a wild branch, you're on the tree, period. But there are, as far as I'm concerned, I know I use this word three. There's a study of three in the Bible. There's so many threes, it's crazy because 3 is a number in Gematria, in Hebrew thinking, for the number of God's perfection. It's very different than 7 and 8 and any other number. So I want to share with you quickly, to the best of that I can quickly, 3 phenomena. 3 phenomena regarding Israel and the Jewish people. Okay? One is the language. The other one is the land. And the last is the return, or aliyah, which means to go up. Whenever somebody returns from the diaspora, meaning any place outside of the nation of Israel, when they go back to Israel, it's called aliyah, because they go up. It does not matter if you're in Mount Hermon in the north, which is 9,500 feet above sea level. When you go to Mount Zion, you're going up. Wherever you go from, you can go from the lowest point on the planet, which is the Dead Sea, and you go to Israel, you go to Jerusalem to Mount Zion, you're going up. You go from Mount Hermon, you're going up. You go from Mount Everest, you're going up when it comes to Mount Zion, because that's the mountain of the Lord. The mountain of the Lord. So let me tell you about the language first, okay? Look at Genesis 11:1 with me. It says the whole earth used the same language, the same words. That means that the whole earth used the same language, the same words. I know some of you are very spiritual and sometimes borderline spooky spiritual, and you're looking for the hidden meaning. You could flip that any way you want. Everybody spoke the same. Okay? According to the Bible, all the people at that time spoke one language until what? The construction of the Tower of Babel, which was in southern Mesopotamia. And that occurred 4000 BC. Okay? Let's take a little look. We'll travel down Genesis 11 a little bit and go to verses 7 and 8. And it says, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language." Again, God is speaking, but he's speaking plural. Let us. That's a whole nother teaching. You can go back to Genesis 1 and take a look at that. We don't have time for that today because that's not our purpose, but we've taught that many times. We taught that God is a unified plurality or a plural unity. And many of you really screw it up when you try to explain the Trinity. Let us go down and confuse their language so that they won't understand each other's speech. So from there, Adonai scattered them all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. During the construction of the tower, God confused the language of man and scattered them as a judgment. God was judging them because man was dealing with their pride. We're going to build a tower so high, we're going to build it to heaven. Listen to me. Religion is building a tower to God. Okay? And I don't care how irreligious you might think a certain denomination is. Everybody thinks their denomination is the right one. Please don't tell people you belong to a denomination. Messianic Judaism is not a denomination. It's a prophetic movement of God to restore Israel, restore the Jew and the Gentile, and usher in Messiah and his 1,000-year reign. It started, if you want to know when it started, it was not 1967. It wasn't even 67. It started with 12 Jewish guys. That's when the Messianic movement started. It never stopped. It just looked like it faded away, okay? It never, ever stopped. Jews have always been present in Israel. They've always been getting saved. But God in 1967, once Israel was back in the hands of, once Jerusalem was back in the hands of the Jewish people, that's when a light switch went off in heaven, and Luke 21:24 was fulfilled. Yeshua's prophecy. It was huge, okay, huge. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So religion is pride. Because we figure out how we can get close to God. God figured out how he can get close to us. We don't go up, he comes down. Okay? So men were prideful, which some things never change, and they were defiant. They weren't doing it. God told them to go to different places on the earth, but they wanted to stay. I mean, is that any different than us today? How many people in Macon really pray, Lord, is this where you want me the rest of my life? Yeah, well, my daughter's here. Okay. I'll ask the question again. Did you pray? That's another story. After the Tower of Babel incident, the descendants of Japheth, you had 3 sons, right? 3 sons that Noah had after the flood, right? Japheth traveled north with their language, which is representative of the Caucasians. God miraculously started to change a little bit of DNA, and you had the Caucasian people in Europe, right? Caucasians. That's where Japheth went. And then the descendants of Ham traveled southwest with their language, and that represents the African folks, okay? And then the descendants of Shem, or the Shemites, or the Semites, traveled west with their language, and these are the people of Israel. These are the people of Saudi Arabia, Arab people. When you say you're anti-Semitic, it's really not appropriate, because a person who hates Jews might not hate Arabs, and Arabs are Semitic people. So I think you should use the appropriate term. You hate Jews. Anti-Semitic is a nice way to say it, but it's not even true. Rabbi, why are you making a big deal over words? Seriously? Did you ask that? I know somebody just did. God told me. What else do you have but your word? Words are unbelievably powerful. Words can heal. Words can totally destroy. Some people remember words that were said over them 40 years ago, and they never been able to get past it. And that's not necessarily their fault. So these are the 3 peoples of the world, basically. Now, Genesis 2:16, it says, Adonai gave the person this order. The person is Adam, the man. And he spoke to him, right? He gave him this order. God was speaking to Adam. He spoke to him, right? It says that right there. What indicates that God gave Adam a language. It wasn't an unknown language. It was a language that Adam could understand, okay? And this language came from God himself, not through the evolution of grunts and groans from the cavemen. It's not true. God spoke to Adam from the beginning. Now, when we look at the names of Adam's descendants, we find that all the names from Adam to Noah and his children are Hebrew names. Now, if he was speaking another language, why would he name all his children Hebrew names? Where would he get Hebrew from? Rabbi, what are you saying? I think you know dang well what I'm saying. Something maybe you've never thought about, but what was the language spoken before the Tower of Babel? Yeah, that's right. And guess what? It was Yeshua's language too. So it behooves somebody to understand Hebrew if they want to understand what he was actually saying. Genesis 14:13 is the first mention of the word Hebrew. Abraham is identified as a Hebrew. Someone who had escaped came. This has to do with the king of Persia. You can read it all in Genesis 14. And some of his booty that he took and some of the people that he took captives. One was Abraham's nephew Lot. So Abraham put together a force of 318 people and went after him. But he's known as Abraham the Hebrew. Genesis 2:6, Moses is known. Exodus 2:6, forgive me. Pharaoh's daughter is bathing in the Nile. She sees a basket moved by. This must be one of the Hebrew. I'm here to tell you that Hebrew. Please don't get caught up in that. Really, it's very hurtful to me personally. Don't replace the Jewish people. Okay, they're Jewish. They have a role. Okay, when you claim to be a member of a lost tribe just because maybe your grandmother ate a piece of matzah, what you're doing is you're walking in replacement theology. You're no different than what some Christians are doing, and you're no different than what the Muslims are doing. Okay? And let me just get this out there. I know a lot of people want to be Jewish today. We could have used you in 1939. Also, 2 Kings 18:28, the children of Israel are known as Hebrews. So here you have it. Okay? This is the language they spoke from the beginning. This is the language that was always spoken in Israel. Aramaic is a type of Hebrew. It's a type of common language. Kind of like I don't know if you realize this, but we don't speak English. We speak Americanese. But it's very, very, very close. So Aramaic is like Americanese. But Hebrew is the formal language that God spoke to Adam, all his descendants, and it's still being spoken. I'll get to the phenomenon in a while. You're probably saying, well, just get to it. Well, you know what? Don't be so impatient because it takes time to bring something to light. You know? Just give me the message so I can go eat. Okay, we also know from many inscriptions discovered in the land of Israel that their language was in fact Hebrew. It's just not the Bible saying it. We have external evidence. Again, I'm giving you external evidence versus internal evidence talking about prophecy. One of the most compelling evidences for the continued use of Hebrew into the 2nd century AD is a letter from the general Simon Bar Kokhba. You know him? He led the rebellion against Rome for Israel, and that was in 135. And he wrote during the Second Jewish Revolt against Rome. And take a look at this. This is his letter. It is Hebrew. Okay? This is 135 AD. This is his actual letter. So he obviously wrote in Hebrew. You're saying, who cares what language it is? Give me a chance. Give me a chance. This letter, along with many others, I don't want to, browbeat you, was written in Hebrew, establishing the fact that Hebrew was still the language of the Jewish people even into the 2nd century AD. It always was, but even into the 2nd century AD. So when the Jews, led by Simon Bar Kokhba, were defeated, 1 million Jews were killed, and the Jews were expulsed. All the Jews were expulsed, the ones that survived, out of Israel. They were dispersed around the world and all over the world. I used to hear people say to me, you don't look Jewish. What does a Jew look like? And you stereotype? Well, they've got a big nose. You've got a big nose. What do Jews look like? I've met Jews in Africa. I've met Jews in India. I've met Jews all over the world. They were dispersed all over the world, guys, in the 2nd century. That initiated what's called the diaspora. I know many New York Jews don't think they're in the diaspora. I'm in the diaspora. Okay? Jesus isn't coming to Rome or Wittenberg or Macon. At this, most Jews adopted the language of the country they resided in. When I was in Italy and I was in Rome, there was a ghetto that the wonderful Pope set up in 1555, such a good Christian. He took all the Jews' money, he took everything away from them and fenced them in. Isn't that beautiful? And took away their professions. They were able to clean the sewers and they couldn't get out. And they got sick and many died. And then when they came in, he gave them up to Hitler years later. Yeah. So I went there to visit the great synagogue there. And I went to the area where they lived, and I wanted to stay there a night or two. And I met some Jewish people, and they spoke Italian. Because when you're in a country, when you get sent to a country as a little child and you're there for centuries, you take on that language, right? Unless you come to America, of course. Shh. Get with the program, guys. It's crazy. We're making all these, it's not right. When I was in Italy, people didn't speak to me in English, and why should they? It's Italy. I mean, if you're a chick and you want to be a firefighter, go for it, but you better be able to carry me out of a burning building. So they adopted the languages wherever they were. But Hebrew continued to be spoken because in the synagogues and the yeshivas, they still spoke Hebrew. Kind of like recently, at the turn of the century, we still had Latin masses in the Catholic Church, correct? But Latin wasn't spoken by the people in America, just in the church. You follow? So I'm trying to explain to you that they still spoke Hebrew in the synagogue, but not fluently. I spoke Hebrew in the synagogue growing up. I was Orthodox, so the service was not in English, no English. And our liturgy was 2 hours long. There was no sermon, and there was no music. Prayers and liturgy, prayers and liturgy, prayers and liturgy. You think you got it tough now? But they didn't speak Hebrew. I didn't speak Hebrew fluently. People think, oh, you speak Hebrew fluently. How do I speak Hebrew fluently? I live in America. But this is the crazy thing. When the state of Israel was established, and David Ben-Gurion, who was one of the big founders, was the first prime minister, he just declared, when you guys come back, Hebrew is going to be our national language. He just made that declaration. Okay? When all the Jews returned from the diaspora, wherever they were, miraculously, they were able to speak Hebrew. That begs the question, in all their exiles and expulsions, how did they maintain a pure language? It was a phenomenon. It was a phenomenon. It was something beyond the scope of natural thinking. It was extraordinary. Now I get to the land, okay? Anybody know Mark Twain? I think I heard of him, Rabbi. He is the father of American literature. The father of American literature. He was born 1835 and died 1910. He wrote a book called The Innocents Abroad. Anybody familiar with it? Okay, it was a humorous travel narrative. It was published in 1869, and it was based on his letters that he wrote to newspapers during his travels in Europe, Egypt, and the Holy Land. That's where he went. That's it. This is what he said when he went to Israel. I'm quoting, "We traverse some miles of desolate country whose soil is given wholly to weeds, a silent, mournful expanse. A desolation is here that not even imagination can grace with pomp of life and action. The further we went, the hotter the sun got, and the more rocky and bare, repulsive, and dreary the landscape became." Not a place you want to go on your vacation, right? It was awful. Nobody was really living there except for a few Jews. And people were dying of malaria, guys. When the first Jews came, the first Zionist Congress, and they said, hey, we got to go back to our homeland. And they went there. Half of them were dying from malaria. It was a giant swamp. Let me show you a picture. That was Israel. Now, has anybody been there? Yeah. It was a giant swamp. The Turkish troops on the northern border, just south of Lebanon, of Israel, they were replacing the troops every month because they were all dying. Now, malaria is still a disease. You know this, right? World Health Organization reports last year 755,000 people died of malaria. It's still a disease, but Israel would have never been Israel And in other words, when they came back, they would have just died. So I want to mention somebody. There was a Dr. Israel Kligger, and I just want to pay tribute to him. He was born in the Ukraine, 1888, came to New York City, studied and became a microbiologist, and his specialty was epidemiology. He literally went to Israel and eradicated malaria and also helped other countries eradicate malaria. Now, this is what's kind of amazing to me. This was Israel in the 20s and like the 30s, but there was a prophecy. There was a few, but I want to give you the one that jumps off the page. Isaiah prophesied in the 27th chapter, 6th verse. He said, the time is coming. Why is he saying that? Because prophets, when they prophesy, they're speaking about something in the future. Okay, he's speaking in 750 BC. We don't know what that prophecy, we don't know when that was going to be fulfilled. Was it going to be fulfilled 700 BC? Nobody knows. They don't tell you when it's going to be fulfilled. They just make the prophecy. He said the time is coming when Yaakov, that's synonymous with Israel. When you see Jacob or Israel, it's the same. Will take root. Now, I just showed you a picture, right? That was 1920s. So 750 years plus 1920 years, right, is a lot of years. That's 2,600 years, and it still didn't take root. Right? Are we okay? Okay. Israel will bud and flower and fill the whole earth with a harvest. Fill the earth with a harvest? And now it's 2,600 years later? You know, some of you don't want to wait a week. You know, if it was you, you go, that's never going to happen. It was a lie. Look at Israel today. That's the same spot that I just showed you. Israel is 7,900 square miles. It is smaller than the size of Metro Atlanta. A state like Texas is 267,000 square miles. Israel is 7,900. Guess what? Today, Israel exports more than $2 billion worth of produce. What? Guys, I said 7,900 square miles. Israel is a world leader. You know, Israel is teaching irrigation all over the world because she just wasn't getting water and she had to figure out a way to get water. And now they're sustaining people's lives all over the world, India, Africa, through their efforts. I mean, diabetes is at an all-time high. It's at an epidemic proportion in the United States. Guess what? You'd all be dead if it wasn't for the Jews. Guess who discovered insulin? And hundreds of others. But just take the shot. Don't thank a Jew. They are world leaders in developing better looking, better tasting, and disease-resistant, more nutritious varieties. They have discovered varieties you probably never heard of, I understand. But the gay lamella, the organti spaghetti squash, the nectarine mango, the grapefruit pomelo, the seedless bell pepper, the black galaxy tomato. These are fruits, superfruits, and they're not genetically modified. Okay? They're God modified. And I know a lot of you, if you live in Macon, you love watermelon. I got news for you. You've never eaten a watermelon until you've eaten a nano watermelon, which grows in the desert. So we've got a phenomenon about the language, right? That's good, but you're not that impressed. I get it. We got a phenomenon about the land. So, but the third one is my cup of tea. This is the one that should spin your head, and this is the one that you just throw up your hands and fall on your face and start worshiping. And it's the return, or as it's known in my circles, the Aliyah. Okay, May 14th, 1948, the Union Jack. Why the Union Jack? What's the Union Jack? Right, Britain's flag, and Britain had a mandate, so Britain controlled what they called Palestine, which, by the way, is no such place. Rabbi, there is such a place. It's in my map in my Bible. Your Bible's wrong. It's a political fabrication. In 135, Rome changed the name of the place from Judea to Syria, Palestina. And that's how you got the name Palestine. They just made it up. There's no such person as a Palestinian, no more than there's such a person as a Georginian. Even though I'm sure some of you would beg to differ. So May 14th, 1948, the UN, first, you know what the UN wants to do? They want to give us, I say us because it's me, man, this is my people. They want to give us Uganda. I have nothing against Uganda, but it's not Israel. Israel's Israel. And the UN is about, is worthy as a pimple on a baby's butt, okay? They are the most useless organization known to man. But the Union Jack was lowered, and Israel was independent. They declared their independence. Okay? David Ben-Gurion, amazing man, 1886 to 1970, was the primary founder of Israel. This is what he said. Let me give you his quote. Quote, "The land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people." Make no mistake. "Here they wrote and gave the Bible to the world." A lot of people don't even realize that. People love their Bible. They don't care about Jews, and the Jews gave them the Bible. "The state of Israel will be open to the immigration of Jews from all countries of their dispersion," meaning it's time. All those prophecies you heard, it's come true today. May 14th, 1948, you come home. Now, the Arab nations knew what was going on behind the scenes. They knew. So they're waiting in the winds, okay? An hour after he makes this announcement. What? An hour after he makes this announcement, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, along with other countries, like Yemen and other countries, but these are the major ones, they declare war on Israel. Now, think about this, guys. God chose this war of independence to happen at a time when Israel was at their weakest. They were post-Holocaust. They just had 6 million people, their people, murdered, systematically and heinously and diabolically murdered. Those that were left were a bag of bones. And let me clear up a myth, okay? I am a very proud American. My father had medals up the wazoo. America didn't help one iota. They didn't send a slingshot. And America knew about the concentration camps because they were written in the New York Times, and I could cite articles, and they did nothing. And Chaim Weizmann met and cried at Truman's feet. And he said, politically, it's not right. And the SS Lewis came in to Miami Harbor with 969 Jews, and FDR, who was president at the time, said, send them back. And when the Jews heard we're going to go back, there was a Norwegian captain that had such a heart for Jews, like, go back. We've got 969 Jews in Miami Harbor. The Jews started jumping off the boat, and FDR told the Coast Guard, shoot them. A lot of times we don't get the real history, do we? So they attack. This can't work. The Jewish sector of Jerusalem was in a state of emergency, total under siege. Ridiculous. This is the ultimate David and Goliath thing going on here. Listen to what they were living on, their food supplies. The people were existing on a weekly ration, 2 ounces of margarine, 1/4 pound of potato. Do you know how much? And 1/4 pound of meat. 1/4 pound of meat, there's 16 ounces in a pound. Okay? 16 ounces in a pound. So what's 1/4 pound? 4 ounces. Do the math. That's 7 days. It's a half an ounce a day. Let me show you a quote from Azam Pasha, the secretary of the Arab League. This will be a war of extermination. And then let me show you a quote from Haj Amin al-Hussein, the spiritual leader of the Palestine Muslims, they call themselves. I declare war on my Muslim brothers. Murder the Jews! Murder them all! Why are the Muslims so emphatic about murdering the Jews? Because they had a false prophecy in 632 AD that God was done with the Jews. And he seemed to be done with them for a long time. But all of a sudden, May 14th, 1948, we're back. And that declares Muhammad and the Quran, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail, to be a lie. A lie is a lie. I don't care if it's small or it's big. A lie is not the truth. Now we stretch the truth. It's not a lie. What is it? Let me show you a chart I put together, and this is fact. This is the weaponry Israel had, and this is the weaponry those 7 nations had. Israel had a tank, but there was no gunner. So it was more or less useless. You can hide in it. It was a one-man tank. The Arab nations had 40 tanks with guns. This is 1948 now. Israel had 2 armored cars. That's pretty good. The Arab nations had 200. Israel had no warplanes. The Arab nations had 74. 74 planes with aerial attacks. And Israel had 5 projectiles, artillery. The Arab nations had 140. Guys, this was so pathetically ridiculous. Now, 9 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days after the war began on March 10th, 1949, the Jews were miraculously victorious. And they were victorious because God said, it's time. When God's promise, and there were promises, intersect with God's timing, you will not fulfill your promise on your timing. You will not. You have to learn how to wait on the Lord. The Bible describes a miracle as a special display of God's power. It's an extraordinary event in the physical world that surpasses all known human or natural powers. David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the newly formed nation, this is what he says. By the way, that picture, go back to that for a minute, I'm sorry. That was Eilat. That's the southernmost part of the Negev. It's the southernmost part of Israel and the northern tip of the Red Sea. That was when the war was over. And David Ben-Gurion says this, and I love this quote, a Jew who doesn't believe in miracles is not a realist. I'm going to tell you something. A lot of you guys know way more than the average Jew knows about Scripture. Way more about theology and way more about dispensation and way more about everything biblically. But they will run circles around you when it comes to believing in miracles. And you know what the crazy part is? A lot of them are secular. How could they be secular and believe in God's miracles? It's a long story. But you try to tell them about the miraculous power of God, and they're like, seriously? Wow. Now look at Isaiah 66:8. It says, who ever heard of such a thing? This is rhetorical. Isaiah is playing with us. Who's heard of such a thing? Who has ever seen such things? Is a country born in one day? Well, see, you're saying that because you lived 2,750 years after this. But I wonder if you would have been saying yes that day. No. No, let's just be fair and be honest. Is a nation brought forth all at once? For as soon as Zion went into labor, when she started going into labor, and she went in those birth pains, nobody was going to stop Israel from being reborn. Nobody. Nobody thwarts the hand of God. Nobody. And nobodies. The prophecy of the rebirth of Israel is over the top. With man, this is impossible. With man, who ever heard of such? No, I've never heard of such thing. With God? Then Isaiah in 60, verse 8, he says, who are these? Flying like clouds, like doves to the... Who? This is 1948. Who are these? Plane loads of Israel's sons and daughters were prophesied to come home. I mean, it's figurative. It's metaphor. You're not going to put thousands of Jews on the wings of a dove or on the wings of an eagle. It's a metaphor. And then Jeremiah says this in the 16th chapter, 14, 15 verse. I'm just giving you little bits of prophecy. Very small. This is not exhaustive by no means. Therefore, says Adonai, the day will come when the people will no longer swear, as Adonai lives who brought the people out of Egypt. Because you know what? Why this is important? There are people that just are anti-Jew, and they're Christians. And they go, well, this already happened. These prophecies happened when they came out of Egypt. First of all, Egypt was before these prophecies. Moron. You don't prophesy after something happens. I prophesy I'm going to throw my glasses. You've got to stone that guy. So Jeremiah says, But as Adonai lives, who brought the people of Israel out of the land of the north and out of the countries where he drove them, even some will go, okay, fine, Rabbi, it wasn't talking about Egypt. It was talking about Babylon. And they came back from the Babylonian exile. 5:16, they came back. Guys, Babylon isn't north. Nor is Babylon all the countries where they're dispersed. And you get, seriously, people with PhDs that will say this. Who brought the people out of the lands of the north and out of the countries, for I will bring them back. He's prophesying worldwide aliyah. 2,500 years before it happened. Worldwide aliyah. And Ezekiel, you know, these are the three biggies. These are the three major prophets, right? Isaiah and Jeremiah, and that's why I'm giving you those. There's many prophecies in the minor prophets. He says, for I will take you from among the nations, not a nation, all over the world. I'm going to gather you from all the countries and return you to your own soil. Not Uganda, Israel. Now, this is the kicker. Look at Isaiah 43, 5 through 6. It says, don't be afraid, because you've got to realize, man, these people are being persecuted in these places. They're being persecuted, beaten, and persecuted. How am I going to get home? How am I going to get to Israel? You've got to understand they've got nothing. They've got no money. How are they going to get there? They have nothing, no possessions, nothing. And God says to them, don't be afraid. I'll get you there. Guys, this is so dang rich for me. Somebody said to me yesterday, they said, is this going to be powerful for you? I said, no, it's going to be powerful for you. It's going to be emotional for me. This is my story. This is why we have a messianic movement. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east. Okay, you could say, well, that's Babylon. I'll gather you from the west. That's not Babylon. I'll say to the north. That's not Babylon. Give them up. I'll say to the south. Don't hold them back. Bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the very ends of the earth. So when he says the east, now, let me just say this. When Isaiah prophesied this, there were no Jews in the west or the north or the south. Forget about the fact that it doesn't even relate to Babylon. There were no Jews there yet. All the Jews were where? In Israel. This is before the Assyrian exile. You follow? He's saying this crazy statement. If I was there, I'd be like, what are you talking about? We're all here. Right? You got it? You feel me, as they say? So the east, he's talking about Arabian Jewish immigration. West, he's talking about European Jewish immigration. North, he's saying Russian Jewish immigration. South, African Jewish immigration. I am currently working with the Ethiopian Jews that are in the land right now with our iPads to teach them how to be nurses and nurses' assistants so they can make a living. So the first, 1949, the first group of Jews that make Aliyah. It was called Operations Eagle's Wings. You ready for this? 1949. There's 49,000 Jews living in Yemen. They're called the Yemenite Jews. It was a Yemen Arab community. They were totally anti-Semitic there. They placed such heavy restrictions on the Jewish community according to their fundamental Islamic teaching. The Jews were to clean the sewers of Yemen. That was their job. Yemen was so primitive, it had no appliances, no tools, no vehicles, and obviously no electricity. The people of Yemen had never seen an airplane before. Just picture this. Not even in a picture. They don't have devices. There's no electricity. Never seen an airplane. And when the first airplane arrived in Yemen, the Jews fell on their face and said, "Look, the eagle's wings." Because they knew the scriptures. Look at Exodus 19:4. They knew this. God said to the children of Israel, back then, he said, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings." Now again, this is figurative. God did not put the Jews in Egypt on eagle's wings. He didn't. But you have to understand ancient Hebrew culture. In ancient Hebrew culture, we revered eagles as mighty warriors because they always cared for their young. Always. Eagles will always carry their eaglets to safety away from predators, no matter what, even if it costs them their life. Sounds like a familiar story? Other birds carry their young in their talons. That's not impressive because if I'm an archer, I can get to the bird. Eagles carry their young on their wings because you got to get to the eagle before you get to the eaglets. You see what I'm saying? Therefore, eagle's wings was an expression of the wonderful and powerful tenderness of God shown to the children of Israel. When you quote this verse that I'm going to show you from Isaiah, you quote it so pathetically out of context. Isaiah 40:31. But those who hope in Adonai will renew their strength, right? How many bumper stickers have you seen that thing on? They will soar aloft as eagle's wings. This has to do with Israel and Aliyah, guys. You can apply it, that you'll regain strength in the Lord, but you've got to interpret it, sweetheart. You must. Otherwise, you do a disservice to the Word of God. Look at what it means to soar aloft. The word is olah. This is the root word of what word? Aliyah. To go up, to be brought, to be carried away. 1950 to 1952, the next operation was called Operation Ezra. There were 150,000 Jews living in Iraq. I have friends that are Jewish from Iraq. They were unbelievably mistreated. Unconscionably so. Today, there's not one Jew living in Iraq. Eagle's wings. They're home. The next big one was Operation Moses, 1985, when they airlifted 8,000 Ethiopian Jews from Sudan. The Jews in Ethiopia today are being so persecuted, we're trying to get them out. But the Ethiopian Jews who are Messianic, they don't have a shot. They don't have a shot. They airlifted 8,000. Eagle's wings. Russian immigration. Has anybody heard of the Cold War? Guys, I don't know if you're aware, but we couldn't get behind that wall. We had no idea what was going on in Russia. Not our greatest intelligence. That's why they called it a Cold War. In 1960 through 1970, for 10 years, the USSR, United Soviet Socialist Republic, as it was known then, they allowed 4,000 Jews to return in 10 years. That's 400 a year. That's 30 a month. There were over 1 million Jews living in Russia. Persecuted. Persecuted. What else is new, right? Russia would not allow any more. They said, this is our way, our country, and there's nothing you could do about it. And you know what? There was nothing we could do about it. Nothing Israel could do. Now the United States was involved at this point. Nothing they could do. But, boom. Jeremiah 23:7-8 says this. This was said 2,500 years before it happened. Therefore, says Adonai, the day will come. You better believe it. When people no longer swear, as Adonai lives, who brought the people out of the land of Egypt, but as Adonai lives, who brought the descendants of the house of Israel up from the land to the north. If you draw a straight line from Jerusalem north, you'll hit Moscow. And from all the countries where I drove them, then they will live in their own land. Guys, believe it or not, I don't know how this happened. I met a couple from Germany on a cruise ship. That was back in the day before I was a believer, and I had a lot of money, and I would take Bernadette away all the time. Believe me, she's happy. She had a good life. We were on this 12-day cruise, this exotic cruise, all throughout from the Bahamas all the way down to Grenada, and there was this couple on the boat. And I was always a pretty good guy, and he was wearing this, you know what a cabana suit is? That silly bathing suit that matches your top and it has terry cloth on the inside that nobody in their right mind would wear anymore. If you are still wearing it, my condolences. And this guy wore it for like 2 or 3 days. So I said to Brenda, I go, what's the deal? Like, this is crazy, right? So she goes, don't worry about it. I said, no, I got to find out. She's like, what are you going to do? I said, you want to come with me? She goes, no, because you think I'm embarrassing now. You know how bad I was before the Lord? Trust me. Trust me. Nobody would dare me to do anything, okay? So I walk up to the guy and I go, hey, dude, why do you keep wearing the same thing every day? How's that for no filter? How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And he goes, the German accent, he goes, we're on a honeymoon and we lost our luggage. And I said, he was about my size. I said, man, that sucks. I said, look, I got a room full of clothes. I said, come with me. Just pick some stuff out. I don't care what it is, you know? And so, you know, he picked out some of my finer threads, by the way. Took my dang black blazer that I loved. They, you know, and they got his luggage a couple of days later, but we got to make friends with them. I didn't know who they were. I never asked. I never asked what people do. I could care less. If I got along with you, you had a good heart, I don't care what you do. What do I care? Everybody wants to know what everybody does, right? What do you do? What do you do? I don't ask people what they do when I first meet them. That's what I do. But I got an unction in 1989. I don't know why. Bernadette and I just got married. I said, let's go visit them because we stayed in touch with them. I didn't know he was wealthy. His wife was a dentist, and he owned cinemas all over Germany. She had homes all over. We flew into Frankfurt. He had a home in Frankfurt. He had an apartment in Berlin. He had a home in Zugspitze in Bavaria, the likes of which, I'm telling you, I was, the hills are alive with the sounds of music. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. Like, you know, no lawnmowers, just sheep, snow-capped mountain. It was unbelievable. He had a home in Detmold, the Eagle Station of Europe. It was crazy. It was crazy. And so the minute I got off the plane, it was a Lufthansa flight. And Lufthansa back then was the elite. They were the best. And I got off the plane, and he meets me in the airport in Frankfurt, and he's crying. I'm like, what the heck is he crying about? And I said, you all right? He said, yeah, how was your flight? I said, it was great. He said, I'm so sorry. I said, what are you sorry about? Everything went great. He goes, I'm so sorry for what your people endured here. I was like, wow. You know, I was a little removed because I became a Christian. See, I didn't know that you could have anything to do with Judaism. In my world, in the world of the projects, you can be Jewish or you can be Catholic. Those are your two choices. I never heard of Protestants. There were no Protestants. It was Jewish or Catholic. And I thought, well, now You know, Jesus, I just thought, was the head of the Catholic Church, and Moses was the head of our organization, and we got along fine in the Bronx. We got along. There wasn't much religious discussion, but when I became a believer, I just thought, as much as it hurt me, as much as I thought my father was turning in his grave, as much as I thought I was disrespecting the 6 million, I had fallen in love with him, so I said, if this is what I got to do, I'll do it. It was only 3 years later that I stumbled upon Messianic. I flipped out when I walked into a Messianic synagogue. When I saw the ark and the star, and they would talk, I just fell on my face. The whole service, I couldn't believe it. I was told a lie. You can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. And if you believe in Jesus, you can't have nothing to do with the Jewish stuff. Lie, lie, truth. Well, we're in Berlin. We get there at night, and forgive me, I'm just going to be dreadfully honest with you. And there's construction going on, but loud, crazy construction at like 2 in the morning. So I lean into Bernadette, and I said, what's the deal with these crowds? They do construction at all hours of the night. And Friedrich was right behind me. He goes, Greg, the Berlin Wall is coming down. I go, oh. Is that right? That's a big deal for you guys, right? Oh, it's a very big deal. It was up for 100 years. I said, all right, my bad. And, the next day we went to the Berlin Wall, and we went to Checkpoint Charlie's, and we were hanging out there, and we went into the Eastern Bloc. But I'm here to tell you, that Berlin Wall was up for 100 years. Nobody could take it down. Overnight, God turned the Berlin Wall into a burlap wall, and he turned the Iron Curtain into a shower curtain when nobody else could do it, and nobody else understands it. Nobody can explain it. And then, all of a sudden, 1989, a record of 71,000 Jews were airlifted from Russia. And since 1990, over 1 million Jews have come home from Russia. Eagle's wings. Next up is Operation Solomon, 1991, when 14,000 Ethiopian Jews were airlifted from Addis Ababa, the airport there. But there's a real interesting story on this one, guys, with one of the planes. They would count. And they would keep count, and then they would report when it landed. When one of the planes arrived in Israel from Ethiopia, the plane actually had an increase of 10 passengers. And they just thought they miscounted, but they counted 3 or 4 times. It was very careful with names. Why do we not have these 10 names? Is this a big deal? Well, the increase came from 10 mothers who actually went into labor on the plane, and there was a doctor and a nurse on the plane because they were so far along, they thought maybe that would happen. So they gave birth to 10 babies. Now, okay, great. What's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal because Jeremiah, in the 31st chapter, the 8th verse, said, look, I am bringing them from the land in the north, gathering them from the far ends of the earth. Among them are the blind and the lame, so the physical infirm will be there. Women with children, okay. Women and their kids. Women in labor? Women in labor. So as they're coming back, they're going to go into labor? What do you think so far, guys? But one of the things, man, that really gets to me, it's such a beautiful thing. Way back in Deuteronomy, God spoke this directly, not through a prophet. It's part of the Israeli covenant, a covenant he made with Israel. And he said in the 4th verse of the 30th chapter, he said, if one of yours was scattered to the very far ends of the sky, I will find you. You will be scattered. Your sins will scatter you. Guys, don't think that God overlooks your sin so much. Even if it's 10 years, 20 years. Rabbi, I've been doing the same sin for 10 years or 20 years. I'm still here. That could change in an instant. Because God is merciful and he hopes you'll come to your senses. So merciful. He's not quick on the trigger. But don't get lulled into thinking, it's all right. He says, I'll find you wherever you are. Now, this was said, 3,400 years before it happened. This is direct from the mouth of God. Indonesia is made up of about 18,000 islands. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's very Islamic. There's 200 million people that live there. It's the fourth most populated country in the world. There was a city called Jakarta, their capital, and there were 50 Jews living there. Guess what? He found them, and they came home. He goes, there are Jewish communities that have been uncovered in Portugal, in the Dominican Republic, in Nigeria, in Uganda, in China, in Italy, Libya, and India. In 2006, the chief rabbinate discovered 7,000 Eastern Indian Jews who maintained their Judaism and airlifted them after 2,700 years of the Assyrian exile. They came home. But this is kind of funny. I shared this with Bernadette. She knows this story because she knows my family. She knows my family so well. You know, she just became a part of them very early on. My dad was a very tough guy, but he did have a soft side to him. And he would do anything for anybody. If you were in trouble, man, he would risk his life. I've seen it a lot of times. But, you know, you're talking about an 18-year-old kid who was a ranger. You're talking about a guy that was shot down. You're talking about a guy who was missing in action. You're talking about a guy who was a prisoner of war. You're talking about a guy who had a Purple Heart. You're talking about a guy who had a Bronze Star for bravery. So you're not dealing with the average Joe, okay? But we used to go to a Chinese restaurant. You know, I don't know if you know about Jews and Chinese restaurants, but, you know, we love Chinese food. And so every time we'd go, and I was a little kid, like the way I kind of embarrassed my kids, he would always say to the waiter, what kind of Jews do you have? Jews. But the waiter always thought he was saying, what kind of juice? So the waiter would always answer, well, we have grapefruit juice, pineapple juice, and orange juice. And my father would always say, you don't have any Chinese Jews, do you? And the guy would go, Chinese Jews? No. But in a way, my father didn't realize he was prophesying. Look at Isaiah 43:5. It says that I will bring your descendants from the east. Now, everybody thinks that's Yemen because they came back from 1949. But there's a place further east than Yemen. And in Isaiah 49:12, it gives us a clue. Look, it says, they will come, some from far away, some from the north, some from the west, some from the land of Sinim. Rabbi, what's Sinim? It's the ancient biblical Hebrew term for China. Now, let me show you a picture of this community. This is an ancient picture of the Chinese Jews in Kaifeng. They maintained Hebrew. They maintained kashrut. They maintained the feasts. They maintained their Judaism in this small community in Kaifeng. Okay? On October 20th, 2009, the first group of Kaifeng Jews arrived in Israel. Take a look. These are the Monday. This is Ben Gurion Airport. Some of you will be there in the near future. He's finding them everywhere. They're all coming home, guys. You're living in an incredible time. Look, I've always talked straight with you, right? The reason why we're not filled to the rafters is most people can't handle straight talk. Forgive me, but that's just the way it is. You know it, and I know it. I know life can be overwhelming. But you know what part of the reason is? We have it too dang good. We never struggle, so the least bit of struggle throws us for a loop. It really does. You could mess somebody up real bad, always doing for them. Look, last but not least, I just want to end with this. There is a crazy phenomenon regarding decisions to divide Israel and natural disasters. If you go to USA Today, you won't believe it. Some of the old papers, on the front page is a political decision to divide Israel, and on the other half is a natural disaster. Right? I mean, God is USA Today. It's not a local paper. It's a national paper. The national paper. And God is like a herald, is sending out a message that's going right over people's heads. So obvious on the front page of a paper. Now, I'm not going to belabor this. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples and we're out. Zechariah 12:2-3 says, I will make Jerusalem a cup that will stagger the surrounding peoples. Even Judah will be caught up in the siege against Jerusalem. I mean, it's not just going to be the city of Jerusalem. When that day comes, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone. Again, it has to be metaphorical. It has to be figurative, symbolic language for all the peoples. All who try to lift it. You can't lift Jerusalem. You can't lift a city. It's a metaphor. All who try to lift it will hurt themselves, and all the earth's nations will be amassed against her. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the only nation that's remotely tied into Israel is America, and that's just about done. I don't know if you realize it. I know you think, no, America's pro-Israel. Seriously? Which America are we talking about? America in 1950? It's America in 2020? Sweetheart, you don't know what's going on in politics? Sure, our president now is pro-Israel. Why? Because he grew up in Queens, and most of his attorneys and friends were Jews. He's down in Palm Beach with a lot of Jews. His daughter converted to Judaism. So he has somewhat of an obvious love for the Jewish people. He has a great friendship with David Ben-Gurion, our former president. When David Ben-Gurion came, he wouldn't even give him the decency to meet him for lunch. Who doesn't meet a prime minister of a democratic country in the midst of 8 million square miles of anti-American hatred? Whatever. I'm not political. I don't make this a political pulpit. But I will be damned if I won't put God into everything. Now let's look at this word, lift up, okay? Amas, to divide. Doesn't mean to lift. In the Hebrew, in Zechariah, he's saying anybody who tries to divide. Guys, there are Christians. First of all, I got to tell you something. Do you know how many people in this town I talk to that love God who will never step foot in a church? God has identified so many people to me. And so I don't understand that, because in the Jewish world, we don't have 27 synagogues in a mile radius. We have one, and then there's another synagogue 100 miles away. So if you don't like that synagogue, it's your problem. You've got to work it out. Here, we don't have to work it out. We just take our misery to another facility. I met a guy the other day. He had just gotten back from Israel. It was a God thing. He's a pastor of a church. He took it over 4 years ago. And he's doing really well because I saw his heart right away. And we had a wonderful conversation. Even though he's about 55 years old, he's very new at the ministry. And I was trying to help him prevent some pitfalls. And he's a Southern boy all the way through. He said, Rabbi, in the South, the way the people look at the pastor is he's supposed to be available 24/7. I said, so when your marriage falls apart and your kids have nothing to do with God, how's that going to work out for you? How did you guys develop that system? Where did you read that? It's not in the Bible. I know that. It's just some sick cultural thing. So I asked him as a PK, because his father and my friend, who's a doctor, his father was a pastor. They were best friends. That's how I know of him. I said, what was it like being a preacher's kid? And I usually hear, well, you live in a fishbowl and people expect so much from you and you just rebel because you're like, fine, I'll give you a reason not to like me. That's not what he said, though. He said, Rabbi, my father was an incredible guy. He'd be outside somebody's ICU at 3 a.m. crying over them. And they would say the worst things about my dad. And that's what caused me to want to have nothing to do with church. Guys, you're a Christian. Do you ever listen to what you're saying? You're supposed to pray for your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. How could you hate another brother? For all I know, there could be somebody over there who's not talking to somebody over there anymore. That's really weird. Not everybody's your cup of tea, but to hate a brother is demonic. Horrific, to say the least. These people that get together, and Christians, believers, I don't care. A believer, whatever you want to say, that think that Israel should give up their land. Can I just ask something? What Bible are you reading? Can you just please, as a believer, give me a chapter and a verse for it? This land is not your land. This land is your land. This land is my land. No, it ain't. This land is his land. And because he has the deed to it, he decides who he's going to give the deed to. And why not just agree with him as opposed to come up with some stupid political fabrication that you know nothing legitimately about? Everybody today talks politics. You don't know jack squat about what goes on in politics. You only know what CNN and Fox News is reporting to you, which is minuscule and not necessarily true. Be biblically correct. Be prophetically correct. Don't worry about politics. You speak more about politics than you do about God. So much time arguing political dogma with other idiots, and you spend no time sharing the gospel. Good on you. And then the churches that grow have the best music because everybody wants to sing songs. Songs don't hurt. And everybody wants to know how you can sign on to the kingdom to make your life better. Because the Lord knows he's here to serve us. October 30th, 1991, the then President George Bush, by the way, who always stood by Israel and then floundered. Guys, it is not where you start. I started a real bad place. It's where you end up. President Bush opening the Madrid conference, which was all about land for peace. This is what he said, land for peace. He wants to give up. First of all, no offense, but who is he? I mean, you can't tell me that. I own a huge parcel of land in Macon. It's 0.68 acres. I bought that. You are in no position to tell me to give that up. But anyway, Israel has to, if they sneeze wrong, they're going to get persecuted, right? Well, the minute he gets up in that pulpit and says Israel needs to give up land, the perfect storm develops. In the North Atlantic, creating the largest waves ever to be recorded in that region. Coincidence? The storm, this is the crazy part, if you know about the perfect storm, it travels 1,000 miles east to west instead of the usual west to east pattern. That's the way it travels, and it traveled the opposite. And where does it end up crashing? Into his dad's house. You started this thing, and your son's walking in this. 35-foot waves crash into Bunkport, the home of President Bush. What's the chances? 8/23/92, the Madrid Conference, Land for Peace, moves to Washington, D.C., and as the peace talks resume, Hurricane Andrew, the worst natural disaster to ever hit America, comes ashore the very next day and produces an estimated $32 billion in damage. Now, this is my favorite. I can kind of go on and on, but this is my favorite. Okay? Let me show you what the Talmud says, first of all. It says, he who creates exiles in the Holy Land, he who creates exiles in the Holy Land will have 100-fold exiles in his own land. Now, there was something called Gush Katif. Are you familiar with that area? It's in Gaza, and I'm not here to boast, but I do have a friend that led this mission as a lieutenant colonel in Israel. It was awful. It was awful. They went into this area. Again, Israel's trying to play nice. We'll give Gaza, we'll give them Gush Katif. They were pulling the Jews out of their homes. My friend couldn't sleep for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, no sleep. They were calling him Hitler. The Jewish people called him, how could you do this to us? You're our people. We live here. They bulldozed all the synagogues. And they removed 8,500 Jews were displaced. The very next day, 8/23/05, Hurricane Katrina develops over the Bahamas and hits Louisiana, and 850,000 people are displaced, a multiple of 100. Last but not least, the opening night of the 2008 Republican Convention was canceled as Hurricane Gustav nailed land, and the tone of the conference was subdued over concern that the massive Hurricane Gustav would be another Katrina. They were talking about Israel giving up land. The day the major hurricane began to form was the same day that the then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice was pressing Israel to sign a document that would divide Israel and give the Palestinians a state in Israel's capital, as well as Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip. They're done. Guys, this is the bottom line, okay? Ezekiel 38 accurately prophesies future enemies of Israel. Not only will there be a Russian-Iranian alliance, but Libya will come along, and Ukraine and Turkey. The bottom line is, in the last days, the countries of the world will become the enemies of God. Every single one. There is no need to fret, because history proves itself time and time again that if you fight against Israel, you are fighting against the God of Israel, and you will lose that battle every single time. Guys, the Lion of Judah is getting ready to roar like never before. I, for one, am incredibly excited. Now, when Israel fought their war in independence in 1948, I know people think they declared war, and then God came down, and 3 hours later, they were eating in celebration. No, 6,400 people died. There is going to be a fallout, and I am not insensitive to that fallout. I do what I do because I'm trying to prevent a fallout. But with that being said, I am unconscionably excited about the Lord returning. I couldn't begin to tell you. I don't feel like I have anything more to do. I don't have anything more to see, and I don't have anything more to accomplish except for what God might ask me to do. Other than that, I'm ready right now. So my personal prayer, and it's just mine, you definitely don't have to agree with me, I don't blame you, is that Yeshua will come back speedily and in our days and take his rightful throne. May the grace of the Lord Yeshua be with you all. Let's stand together. Hopefully and prayerfully, we will just conclude this thing of what we've done for the last 5 weeks and just try to figure out, okay, great, Rabbi, where do we go from here? Because that's always the problem, right? This is what you should do, or this is what you need to do. Well, okay, how do I do it? You know, what's going on? Because I don't know if you realize, but it's not great out there. But this is the thing. The church, the Christians, the Messianic Jews, whatever you want to call it, they're always looking at the world and saying how bad it is. My Bible says discipline starts in the house of the Lord, not in the world. Now, guys, I don't want you to be like this. You know, I never want to come here because he doesn't make me feel good. God. Wow. I don't want to make you feel good. I don't want to make you feel bad. I want to tell you that don't go by me. Don't go by my theology or my understanding or my experiences. Don't. I have told you a gazillion times not to. Get with God. Read the Bible. Let the Holy Spirit take over in your life and figure out what God's calling you to do and your walk. Not mine. Not mine. I do know this, though. For me to be standing here, in Macon, Georgia, and doing what I'm doing, I'm here to declare to you, God is so merciful. I have absolutely no worthiness to be able to do what I'm doing. So if you ever think, is God merciful? The answer is yes. A big, fat yes. God is tender, and he's loving, and he's kind, and he's crazy about us. I think we should return the favor. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the Lord lift up his very countenance upon you and give you his peace in the name of the Prince of all peace, Yeshua. Yivarechach Adonai v'yishmerecha Yo'er Adonai pono v'elecha v'hunecha Yisa Adonai pono v'elecha v'yasem lecha Shalom. I love you guys. Shabbat shalom.